I'll keep going right now. I like to enter my luck. Now I'm paying for judges.
Right, yeah. That's important.
But right now, I think there's only 4 judges. I've heard that Lang is going to have another one.
Yeah. I just saw Ames retiring out of
Oh, I didn't hear that.
yeah. So I think he's done. But that'll be another governor.
Yeah, the governor, he's a little slighted.
Alex every now and then.
Well, he was down here this week for training.
Oh, that's right.
So we went out to dinner with me and the other JP. So Kathy and I went out with them. So yeah, Alex just sent me a couple of colloquies he's had some frequent. But just to be on his Christmas letter deal.
Oh my gosh.
So he's always great. He's always such a sarcastic writer. So, well, when are we going to get a new book from you?
From what?
From you?
Me?
Okay.
I used to have more than that.
Part of it is there's a lot of ugliness. That's right. You get attacked on the left, on the right, from your own people. Yeah, that's how many loyalty oaths are you supposed to give? Well, you do go for it.
Room for one more bite. That's
How was your trip? Oh, it was 80 degrees every day. No, they had some races and tequila down there. That's good, good. Felt safe? Oh, yeah, very safe. This is a standalone place. There's nobody else there. People are telling me Tahoe gang There's a last minute here. Doesn't have Very confident.
Can everyone hear me? Attorney General Jeff Sessions has worked in and around law enforcement for the last 40 years. He was an assistant United States attorney. He was a United States attorney appointed by President Ronald Reagan. He was Attorney General of Alabama, and he was a U.S. Senator serving on the Judiciary Committee. Today, he of course serves as the 84th Attorney General of the United States. President Trump called the opioid crisis a health emergency. General Sessions has amplified that call by focusing Department of Justice resources to highlight this problem and to address the opioid crisis. Montana is caught in the clutches of meth addiction and a growing problem with opioids. At the United States Attorney's Office, we are grateful for the Attorney General's support as we work with many in this room to try to solve these problems. Please join me in welcoming Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
Thank you. It's super to be with you, and I appreciate the opportunity indeed. And Kurt, I know you're excited about the work that are ahead of you. You have some outstanding plans that are taking place soon. I'm pleased to be here to support you, and thank you for your leadership. And Lynette, thank you for your hosting us here today. It's a remarkable thing that you're doing, and here in the treatment world, it's a big part of what we have to do in America. And look, I don't think it's changed. Lynette tells me it hasn't. It hasn't changed that you have the fundamental three pillars of how to deal with the drug crisis. First is prevention. In the long run, the fewer people who start this path, the better off we all are. It's got to be the number one thing. And then the law enforcement community. Department of Justice, we have the Drug Enforcement Administration, the FBI, the ATF, Marshal Service. Those are our team, working with state and local teams, where 85% of law enforcement is in state and local. That is the enforcement mechanism, and the third part is treatment. And Congress did, and the President agreed a few weeks ago to a big increase for those three items. We get a nice increase in the Department of Justice and other law enforcement areas. We had a significant increase in the prevention and the messaging. Kellyanne Conway is personally excited and determined to use her skills and other skills to try to communicate the proper messaging. And the third thing is treatment, which will, I think, get the biggest part of the $6 billion that's going to be added to our normal expenditures. So I think, from my experience, The last 2 days with the Senate and House Appropriations Committee, a little better the last 2 days than has been in the past, and they are really charged up about this. They were supportive of our plans, and they have their own support views and things that they'd like to see accomplished. And I just believe that we're on the right path now. You got to recognize the problem, you got to identify a strategy to deal with it, and if you execute that relentlessly, then it works. I get in trouble when I talk about what we used to do in the old days, but I will say that the Nancy Reagan Just Say No and other things that happened at that time, increased law enforcement, really was not a failure. Homicide rates over 15 years dropped by 1/2. Drug use, according to the University of Michigan study, it's still the authoritative study, showed that half the high school seniors in 1981 acknowledged using an illegal drug. That fell by half. Think how many young people's futures were brighter because we didn't see that get worse, but indeed got better. So I am totally convinced that if we stay the course, we use even improved procedures that we've learned over the last 30, 40 years, that we can do even better to confront this crisis. And Lynette, thank you and your whole team here, because you'll be playing a huge role in it. Well, it's an honor to be here. I want to discuss some of the actions that the Department of Justice has taken to focus on the drug crisis, something I think will benefit us all. I know we have a good treatment community group here, but I'm really talking today about our role, which is the more enforcement role, and celebrate our fabulous state and local law officers that are here that can help us deal with the challenges we face. We've got Tim McDermott of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Hold your hand up wherever if you're here. Hey, Tim, we thank you, and you administrator, Rob Patterson, been talking with him, and we're committed to getting resources now, not 2-3 years down the road, but how to confront this crisis now. I'm excited about that. Acting U.S. Marshal Rod Ostermiller and Ian Blair. Rod, I guess, is here. Hey, there you go, Marshal. And Ian Blair with the Secret Service. Ian, nice to see you. We've got Supervisory Probation Officers Marty Highland and Brian Farron. Steve, are they here? Good. You deal with human beings on a regular basis that struggle in this area. Stephen Osborne with the IRS. Stephen, good. Greg Cozy Arek. Is that pretty close? Not too close. With our postal inspectors, who are fabulous people, part of the federal team, Michael Stewart of Customs and Border Protection, and Montana Chief Deputy Attorney General John Binion. John, thank you, prosecutor, and Colonel Tom Butler of the Montana Highway Patrol. That's a good group. Well, thank you all for being here. There can be no doubt, really, that this is the deadliest drug crisis in our nation's history. We had a lot of drugs in the 70s and 80s, but nothing like the death-dealing drugs we have today. Approximately 64,000 people died in 2016 of overdose deaths, and that represents the largest cause of death for Americans 50 years old and below. The largest cause of death is drug overdoses. We've never, I don't think, seen anything like that before. That's nearly the population of Missoula, dead in 1 year from overdose. Preliminary data shows that another increase will be in store for 2017, perhaps a little smaller. We want to see those rates go down. We don't want to see them go up anymore. We want to drive those numbers down. And we recognize the crisis is taking a toll on our Native American tribal areas. According to one report, Native Americans had the highest drug overdose death rates of all in 2015. And I know that Kurt and his team have prosecuted a number of drug trafficking cases affecting Indian territory here. Well, here in the West, there's also the threat of methamphetamine. In 2016, more than 7,500 Americans lost their lives to methamphetamine overdose. That number is a sharp increase as well. It appears to me that in Mexico, the manufacturers, the laboratories have the ability to produce as much meth as you want. All that can be consumed, they can produce. And through our porous borders, they're getting it in a routine basis. It's a compact substance, and it's difficult to stop, and we still have far too much openness on our borders. Most of the DEA agents in the West say that meth here is a bigger problem than heroin, but heroin is a problem here, and we are seeing fentanyl. Both of these threats are growing. According to the Montana Department of Justice, methamphetamine violations in this state rose by more than 400% between 2010 and 2015. And meanwhile, heroin violations increased 1,500% during that time. So these, as you know, are not just numbers. When we talk about drug abuse and addiction, we're talking about the lives of moms and dads and daughters and spouses, friends and neighbors. We're talking about lives of fellow American citizens. That includes Natalie Dietrich, a student at Montana State, who was given a synthetic opioid at a concert in Bozeman. She was an economics student. She had a promising life ahead of her, but now that is a future we will never see. It includes Caden Fowler from Hamilton, who was found dead at home of an overdose of opioids at just 16 years of age. Caden's mom, Brandy, is an outspoken advocate now who's working to prevent the spread of drug abuse, and I want to commend her for that. And we also remember the story of Kinsley Olson of Poplar, Montana. Kinsley was a 13-month-old baby who was sick with the flu. She couldn't stop crying. The woman who was watching her was high on methamphetamine and in a fit of rage beat the child to death. There are many stories like this. Many of you probably know some of those stories that are so heartbreaking. But we're not going to accept this as a status quo. We will not accept business as usual. We cannot do that. This country has the ability to respond, and we will respond. Ending the drug crisis is a top priority of the president. He's declared a comprehensive plan throughout the entire government, every cabinet department, and he's declared a national public health emergency in America. He wants to improve our prevention efforts by launching a nationwide awareness campaign about the dangers of opioid abuse. He set an ambitious goal for reducing opioid prescriptions in America by 1/3 over 3 years. I believe we are prescribing too many opioids. I think there's a national consensus on it. I keep hearing people tell me, they tell a doctor, I don't want any of those opioids. Whatever is happening in a lot of ways. One is total illegality and criminal behavior by physicians, hospitals, pharmacists. It's unbelievable. Much bigger problem than I realized. Millions of pills. We have 16 doctors charged with illegally prescribing 20 million pills, opioid pills. So we're going to target those doctors. We have a plan to do that. We have a computer system that identifies the outliers. We will not accept that. In addition to that, I think physicians are being more careful, and I think patients are being more careful. So I think we can achieve a substantial reduction in addictive opioid prescription medicines that could indeed and in fact keep people from moving on to heroin and fentanyl. Now, we will embrace that goal, and we're going to work at it and do our part, as are other cabinet agencies. And I know we can do it. Tomorrow, the DEA will hold its semi-annual National Drug Take-Back Day. Last year, they had 2 events. They have 2 a year. They took in more than 900 tons of dangerous drugs off our streets. So I urge all of you to participate in the Drug Take-Back Day tomorrow. I think it's a good way to highlight the danger, make sure that pills are being sold on the street, stolen from people's homes, children getting more than they should. It's a very good plan, and I hope you'll support it. Early last year, DEA, Department of Homeland Security, and local law enforcement executed search warrants on the residence of an alleged drug trafficker in Great Falls. They seized numerous firearms, 15 pounds of methamphetamine, nearly $250,000 in cash. Now that drug trafficker has been sentenced to 18 years, essentially without parole. Back in August, DEA worked with the state and local law enforcement to seize 17 pounds of methamphetamine that was on its way to Billings from the southwest. Just a week ago, DEA and Customs and Border Protection agents seized more than 85 pounds of methamphetamine that was allegedly being trafficked by the Sinaloa cartel. These are huge seizures. A pound of methamphetamine is a tremendous number of dosage units. Kurt, I know you have a very definitive plan to focus on this. We also want you to be aware that the killer drug in the United States as a whole is fentanyl. Synthetic opioids like fentanyl killed 20,000 Americans last year. Most fentanyl does not come from the United States. The vast majority of it is made in China and then shipped here either through the mail or brought across our porous border. Fentanyl is 50 times more powerful than heroin. It's so strong, a few grains, a pinch, the size of a pinch of salt can be fatal. It's driving the surge in deaths around the country. And in the East, it's the dominant cause of death by far. West Virginia, Ohio, New Hampshire, Massachusetts. And that's why the Department of Justice had a special focus on fentanyl, tripling the number of prosecutions from 2016 to 2017. And we don't want it spreading here any more than it already is. In October, the department announced the first ever indictments of Chinese nationals for fentanyl trafficking in the United States. And in North Dakota, where I just came this morning from Fargo, they announced another major unsealing of 2 indictments charging 10 additional defendants, including 4 Chinese nationals and 6 defendants from the East Coast. In total, 32 defendants have been charged as a part of this law enforcement operation against fentanyl. And it rose this way. There was a young teenager in North Dakota that died of a drug overdose, and they just relentlessly worked back. And they went to Canada, Florida, the East Coast, Oregon, and all the way to China. But that's the way the networks are working. We've got to figure out how to be more effective in confronting them. So they and their co-conspirators use the mail. You can order too often product straight from the mail, and it killed people in North Carolina, New Jersey, Oregon, as well as North Dakota. So we've suffered the worst drug crisis in our nation's history. We've also seen violent crime rise. 12% increase in 15, an 8% increase in homicide in 16, 20% in 2 years, the largest increase we've seen in that kind of homicide since 1968. That is not a trend we want to see continue. So it does connect to drug distribution networks. If you want to collect a drug debt, you collect it with a barrel of a gun. You can't go to court and file a lawsuit. Surely as night follows day, violence and death follow drug trafficking. From 1992 to 2014, crime declined in America. But from 2014 to 2016, the trends did reverse. And that's our concern. Assaults went up 10%, and rape went up 11% in addition to the homicide rate. Here in Montana, the violent crime rate went up nearly 14%. Rape increased here 5%, aggravated assault 15%, robbery increased by nearly 30%. These are trends we cannot allow to continue. It will reverse the 30 years of crime decline that we've seen in America, and it can reverse it in a very short period of time. According to the Department of Justice study, nearly a quarter of the increase in homicides is a result of the increase in drug-related homicides. So Kurt tells me that meth trafficking is driving much of your crime here. Some people will tell you that law enforcement doesn't make a difference. There ought to be other ways to reverse crime. I wish there were other ways, and I'm open to any ways that work. These people think that crime is sort of like the tides, you know, they just rise and fall, and all we can do is float on the top, and we're controlled by those forces. And I utterly reject that view. I was present, participating at the reversal of surging crime rates for 2 decades, of surging drug ingestion rates that increased for 2 decades. We changed that, and we can change it again. The Department of Justice, we believe that through legal reforms, more and continued policing strategies of sophistication that we are better at today than we were years ago, and an investment in our officers. Our officers are better trained, better equipped than we've ever had them before. We can be effective in reducing crime. The day I was sworn in as Attorney General, President Trump sent me an executive order that directed us simply and directly, and he can be pretty simple and direct. This time he says, reduce crime in America. That's what he sent me there to do. And we at the Department of Justice embrace that goal. We're not here to see crime increase, increase, increase. We want to see it go down. We want to see homicides go down, not up. We want to see overdose deaths go down, not up. So that's what we're going to try to do. And I've got good U.S. attorneys and our officers around here and our state and local police working together. We can make a difference. So the centerpiece of our crime strategy is a tested and proven strategy called Project Safe Neighborhoods. And that, here's how it works. I've ordered Kurt and our other United States attorneys to target and prioritize prosecutions of the most violent people in the most violent areas. New York has had great success with this, the COMSTAT program. They say they're targeting the alpha criminal. And if you stay after them and you keep knocking them, crime rate starts going down. And New York has one of the lowest murder rates of any major city in the country, and others much smaller have multiples of New York murders. And second, I've ordered our people to engage with a wide variety of stakeholders, from police to mayors to community groups and victims advocates, in order to identify the specific needs of your community, which is different than New Hampshire and in Alabama, and to use the resources you have to customize a violent crime, drug crime reduction strategy. This builds on another order that the President sent to us, one of 3 at the very beginning. Back the women and men in blue. So we are going to work with our state and local law enforcement officers, not at odds with you. And like I said, it's proven to work. One study showed, a careful review of the previous iteration of the Project Safe Neighborhood showed that in the first 7 years, PSN reduced violent crime overall by 4.1%, with case studies showing reductions in certain areas of up to 42%. There are Americans who are alive and well today because the program made a difference. So we've asked Congress for $140 million for this project, not too much in my opinion at all. And the money would be used primarily, almost exclusively, to award grants to local recipients, which would be local law enforcement or state agencies. And that money would be used in a coordinated way to build a team-targeted plan to fight crime in your district. So it's not coming to the federal people, it's coming to our state and local people. I believe it will work again, and I believe it will work in Montana. When we invest in our law officers and work with our local community, that's where we're going to get the results. And so I want to close by reiterating my deep appreciation and profound thanks to all the women and men of law enforcement, federal, state, local, tribal, as well as their families for sacrificing so much, for putting your lives on the line every day so that the rest of us may enjoy the safety and security you provide. You make the difference. You make the difference every day. The work you do is essential. I believe it. The Department of Justice believes it. President Trump believes it. And you can be sure about this. We have your backs, and you have our thanks. Thank you all for the honor of allowing me to be with you. We look forward to working with you in the future, and may God's blessing be on us all. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you all. Good to be with you.
We want to thank you all. We want to thank you all for coming today. I know we have people here from local law enforcement, county law enforcement, the state, federal, and I want to thank you all for coming. And I also want to thank our elected leaders. We have elected tribal leaders here. We have elected county leaders, judges, county commissioner, county attorney. We want to thank you all for coming. And in ending, just let me say that I can tell you our office looks forward to working with everyone in this room. I think I know just about everybody in this room as we go forward and look what we can do for the state, what we can do for our tribal communities, what we can do for this community to try to deal with this problem that's driving not only violent crime, but is also affecting foster care, our hospitals, our treatment facilities, and our jails. So again, thank you for coming, and if you would, we sure appreciate the Attorney General coming and supporting Montana. If you wouldn't mind, join me one more time in thanking him for coming.